This is our first Lotus Group talk. As many of you who do know me pretty well, I'm a super forgetful person, so I've got a little cheat sheet for myself to make sure I don't thank people, make sure I don't forget to thank people like Amanda for getting this whole thing set up. So what's a Lotus Group talk? How this came about is we used to do a lot of different events. We'd do barbecues, we'd do a charity event, etc. And really we were trying to get the community together. And it was fun, it was interesting, but the issue was no one really needs free food, right? That's not what we're trying to do here. It's not that interesting from that standpoint. So when we talked to a number of our clients and we looked introspectively in ourselves, we came to the conclusion that we wanted some event that would be a little bit more meaningful, that would be tied more to our mission. And our mission is to maximize human potential. So the types of topics that we started thinking about were, how do you reduce fear in people's lives? How do you create balance in your life? How do you deal with career aspirations and figure things out of that nature? And so these were the kinds of things that we were looking to cover. And we were going to look externally, and then we were talking to one of our clients, Anil, who happens to not be here tonight, but he said, why should we look externally? Let's look internally. The client base that we already have here is so unbelievable and amazing. I would just like to hear from them. And so that's what we decided to do. And the more and more we thought about it, the more and more we realized that there were people with incredible stories amongst the folks that we already knew. So that's how it got started. The format that we are intending to do is a 20 to 30 minute talk. So Mike, we'll see if you can stay within the 20 to 30 minute talk. And then after that, open it up to a Q&A, because the intent is to not just hear this person's life story, but to see how it connects to you and to allow you to ask questions. And we don't want these to only be sort of softball questions. We'd like you to ask a challenging question too, to see how this may pertain or may not pertain to you. It's also open to the community. This is, as we look around tonight, we certainly have some clients here, but we also have partners of ours who work with us in the private investment space. We have folks who are just friends. We have family that are involved. This is not intended to be a Lotus Group event. This is intended to be a community event that allows us to really help push that forward. So, sounded all good, great idea. People were really excited about it. I remember talking to Jen and Tom at the last barbecue, and they're like, that would be great, let's do this. And then we hit our first snafu, right? So our first snafu is we send out this invite, and we called it Cocktails and Conversations. And it's like crickets. You know, no one's responding to this. And we're trying to figure out, why is no one talking about cocktails and conversations? And I think, you know, our hypothesis was, no one wants to be on the hook to talk, right? No one wants, I don't need a conversation all day long. I'm at work, I'm busy doing stuff. Like, I don't want you to force me to talk. So we changed it from cocktails to conversations, Amanda and I. We changed it to Lotus Group Talks, and all of a sudden everyone's signing up, you know, for these different things. So sort of had to work through that first snafu. Our plan is to do about 2 or 3 of these per year and line up different folks who speak on those different topics that we talked about. We are now videotaping it, so folks who are remote, who are clients of ours, who have said, you know, we love what you're doing, but I'm in San Francisco and I can't see this, so can you please do something and tape it for me? I'm excited to say that tonight we have a couple folks. We've got Bob and Jenny who came in from out of town to probably for other reasons, but we're going to say they're here for this event. Is really, you're here for us, right? Great, thanks, Bob. So we'll do 2 to 3 a year. Lotus Groups, we're going to make sure that the venue is done. We're going to make sure the speaker is here. We're going to take care of logistics, food, drink, all those types of things. All we're just asking for is participation. We're going to try to get a survey out to you guys into your email, to just quick 7-question survey afterwards to just say, what could we do better? This is really intended to help on that. And then just to spread the word. So that's really the intent of what these are. So with that said, we've got Mike Kubena, who's here tonight. A number of you guys have seen his blurb, or a mini blurb. it's always funny to take a whole life and sort of put it down into a paragraph. And I remember you and I looking at it, and the first thing you said to me, do you remember what you said the first thing?
Is that really me?
He's like, I want to meet that guy. And he's not that kind of a guy. He's a super humble person, so it was pretty funny. Mike has become very quickly a friend and a confidant for me. His daughter Abby goes to school with my son Jackson. They're in the same class. His wife Carolyn is here this evening as well. And he's not only just a wonderful man, and he comes from a wonderful family. For me, I think a lot of you know me, I'm pretty determined in what I do, believe I have a lot of the answers. And what's interesting is, in his own kind, gentle, humble, nice way, has changed who I am and the way I think. And I've made big changes in my life without him coming to me and confronting me and saying, hey, do these things. He's just asked questions, been there, and all of a sudden I feel like I've come to these answers myself, right? Which is kind of genius in its own way. So I think tonight what you'll hear is a really incredible journey from Mike. I think you'll also hear a real great story of personal exploration that we are all going through in some way, shape, or form. Some of us formally think about it. Some of us don't. Some of us just drink, and when we're drunk, we talk about it. Some of us do Prozac. You know, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. We're trying to figure this out. But I think it's a really great story of how the person who seemingly had it all kind of walked away from it, and the story's much bigger than that. So without further ado, for the tens of hundreds of people that are in this room and the millions of people around the world, let's get ready to rumble! Mike Kubena!
Okay, wow. Thank you, Raph, for that introduction. There's things in there that I didn't know about myself, but that's really cool. I like it. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Thanks to everybody for being here. And so I can get forward here. When I talked to Raph about this, he said, look, I want to talk about things that go beyond just thinking about, financial security and considerations and this sort of thing, which is something that Lotus Group's obviously known for. But he wants to connect to the mission, maximizing human potential and making life count. And so we want to have conversations that matter. And that really touched me because it's something that means a lot to me. Finding a place for deep, authentic connection and the courage to bring that out into a broader community, to me, is really important. Years ago, I worked with a partner who, whenever we were in a meeting, after about 5 or 10 minutes, if things were dragging a bit, he'd go, if we're not here to talk about something important, then why am I here? And the only good answer was because there's booze and food. But if I didn't have that, I knew I was in trouble. And so my challenge tonight, and really the remit from Raph, was let's talk about something important and something that's important to me, and that's kind of what this is about. In thinking about that, I don't think I've taken a small bite at the apple. I want to talk about something that I think does matter, that I know touches everybody in one way or another, and we're all in this place. We're all in this place where we're looking for this quest for life purpose. What does it mean? I've had this conversation with lots of people, and I think, and I hope it's something that connects with you. But I also want to make space for the reality that you can, if you have access to the screen, you can read the quotation by the Dalai Lama, that I am not bringing you the truth. If I had the answer, I would probably not be giving a speech here right now. I would have something different perhaps. But I have given a lot of thought and consideration to it, and I have been on a big journey myself. And I want to share that with you a little bit tonight and tell you a little bit about what purpose means to me, and maybe that'll open a door or give you an idea for a next step, and then also how it's played out in my life, and what that journey has looked like. Purpose, why do we need it? Interestingly, if you look around in the planet on the Earth, most creatures have a really, really simple purpose. You sort of just show up. If you're a tree or an animal of any variety, the dog in your house, you kind of just show up. You hang around as long as you can, you survive, and then at some point you die. That's kind of what happens. And even the death part is sort of a very integral part to the whole life. But for humans, it's not quite that simple, is it? We've sort of mastered the food chain. We've got the survival thing down for the most part, and that's not necessarily true for everybody on the planet, but it's true for the people in this room. And so we've sort of shifted, for generations, for thousands of years, the Mayans or the Egyptians, we've looked at the stars and we've contemplated what our higher purpose was. We've connected to the concept of God, and we've created all of these things that create meaning. We've even talked about legacy. I'm going to do something in my life that in some small or big way is going to actually make me immortal. I will have a legacy that survives beyond me. What an amazing concept. So this is clearly something that's important to us. It's something that we deserve to think about. We have this big brain that we've created that gives us the capacity to think about it. So I'm kind of welcoming that possibility and saying, let's talk about that. What does that really mean for us? Not just as spiritual creatures, but as human beings that kind of walk on the ethereal, on the material plane. So I started by saying, how do you define it? I mean, it is a word, so why not think about how we would define it? Oxford Dictionary gives it a very straightforward definition, which is essentially a reason for being. A reason for being. Okay, yeah, they use slightly different words. But I thought about it and said, well, that doesn't give me much to hang on to. I thought, since we're all in the same boat, we all come in different flavors, okay? But there must be some commonality between what purpose represents in each of our lives. There must be something that hangs us together. And so the words I came up with, and as I said before, this isn't the only way of saying it, the words I came up with these. Human purpose, we're called to fully bring our gifts into the world. And I think the concept to me of being called to do it connects to that deeper concept of purpose, that need to pull it forward, that need to say this is something that it's not something that I just want to do, it's something that I'm made to do. It's something that is either innate or developed in me and I want to bring into the world. The other thing that kind of connected to me is, well, if you buy off on that definition to some extent, then, well, what are these things I want to bring into the world? What are these gifts, okay? And I thought it was worth thinking about that and maybe even putting some words down. And this was my take on it. The gifts must be intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual qualities or traits that are innate or developed in us. Obviously Tom Brady has some sort of innate physical ability to play football, okay? I'm not a New England Patriots fan, and I begrudgingly say that, but evidence proves it's true, okay? But it also occurred to me that something really important is missing. If that's all it means, there's something else that's missing. And I came down to this. The gift isn't necessarily in the thing that's being manifested. It's connected to the way you bring it forward. And it's aligned with some positive intent toward both yourself and the other, the world, whoever you're with. What do I mean by that? If you're giving an engagement ring to your fiancé, okay, that is a symbol. Okay, that is a symbol of something, a feeling and an intent. I hope the feeling would be love. okay? And the intent might be to spend the rest of your lives together. And those of you who are contemplating marriage, I can feel they're starting to shake a little bit. If the intent, okay, or the gift is actually the ring, I would submit to you, you need to go do some counseling, okay? If it really is about the size of the rock, okay? So this kind of establishes for me that if bringing our gifts into the world is what we want to do, it's not just about showing up. It's showing up in a certain way. It's bringing both this sort of presence, this sense of feeling and intent to what I am doing. And that's what makes it a gift. That's when the symbol becomes something real. And that felt really important to me. Now, I'm going to go through something. This, I promise, is like the most complex thing I will say or do all night. But try to bear with me because I think this is important to the concept of what purpose is. Purpose, in my belief, exists from the moment you are born. Okay? There's never a moment in your life where there is not a purpose, but it connects to a process. And this is something that I've explored myself, I've explored with others. My wife has been pretty seminal in helping me through this, but I think it might hold together. The first is forming and growing. We're born. This is a phase, and don't pay too much attention to the age ranges, but somewhere between the time of 0 and 20, when we start to feel a little bit like adult. We're born, we connect, we go through all the attachment phases, and then something happens. How many of you are parents? Raise your hands if you're a parent. Okay. How many of us have screwed up our kids? Okay. You can't not screw up your kids. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You either don't give them enough attention and they're going to be needy. You give them too much attention and they're consumed and overwhelmed. You give them just the right amount of attention and they become perfectionists. Okay, so the point isn't whether we've screwed them up. The point is just recognizing we all bring some sort of, and I'll use the word wounding. Okay, we have it. It's there, and it matters. For me, I'll tell you my story in a bit. As a child, I had it, and my mom tried really hard. She did a lot of good stuff, but it happened. But we stick with this, and the key to this first phase is constant growth. We're growing, we're growing, we're growing from the head all the way down to our toes. We keep growing, and then at some point, and if you've had teenagers and they get to the 16, 17, 18, 19, they suddenly realize, hey, this is it. I'm ready to go out there. I'm ready, and in fact, I know a hell of a lot more than you do. I know more than you do. I have my daughter here. This is dangerous stuff. So it's time to test drive this beautiful new machine that's been put together. And we go into what I would call stage 2, a launching and seeking phase. This is what I would describe as the test driving of the script of me. Everything I've got, is kind of, it's kind of what my parents told me I needed to be, what the world, my friends, the schools, everyone's kind of told, and I put it all together and said, I'm gonna go in there and I'm gonna do stuff now and see how it works. So what do I do? Well, probably true for this crowd, we tend to want to get an education, so we go to college. Great. We want to start our career, we get a job. Fantastic. Maybe we meet somebody and we get married. Awesome. Maybe we decide to have kids. Fantastic, fantastic. All of these things start happening, and it feels and it is terribly purposeful. Okay? But remember the thing I mentioned before, this wounding. It's still there, and it's playing out all this time. There are going to be little patterns that you're playing out in your life, but they're not that important right now because you see the clarity. These are the things I need to do. And it's fantastic, and it can be a wonderful phase. So what happens next? What I would call is a stage 3, which is storming. Maybe it starts around 40, maybe it starts earlier, maybe later. I don't know for exactly, but I think a lot of people in this room have felt it. It starts with this feeling something doesn't feel quite right. I've done all this stuff. Maybe it's gone incredibly well. I've had this awesome career. I've got this really cool house and this really nice car, blah, 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 blah. But something doesn't feel quite right. Something doesn't feel quite right. So we go into what's called kind of a seeking and reconciliation. How do I explain why something on the inside is telling me something's not quite right, even if things on the outside look great? Or maybe they don't look great, but the two just don't reconcile. What do I do with that? Then we go through what's called kind of a breakdown, breakthrough, or healing. The breakdown can happen in a lot of ways. And maybe it doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens to a lot of people. Maybe it's the death of a loved one, someone who's close to you. Maybe it's a problem in your career. Maybe it's a problem with your marriage. Maybe it's a problem with your children, something serious. Maybe it's a drug problem. Maybe it's depression or whatever it might be. And you're confronted with this reality. I've got these feelings. I've got this situation now. And you have a choice. You have a really important choice to make. And it comes down to what I'm calling kind of change or recommitment. Change, in the way I'm describing it, is when you stop and say, hey, I've got to look at these feelings I'm having. I've got to look at how this thing that's happening in front of me is affecting me. And I've got to take responsibility for what's going on right now. And then, when I've really done that work, I can start to think about, what do I need to do? Do I need to do something? Maybe I don't need to do anything. Maybe I need to make a big change, okay? And that's a really, really important part, and I think it's something many of us share. Recommitment. Recommitment is a different approach. It's saying, I don't feel good, something bad's happening in my life, and the problem is out there. If I make a change, maybe it's buying a new car, maybe it's a new relationship, maybe it's whatever it is. If I make a change, then that will probably fix it. And what this model suggests is that decision, while I'm not making a judgment, it's not wrong. There's not a right and a wrong here. That's more or less a decision to go back to stage 2 and say, I want to do a little more launching and seeking here because I've done something. And I think the thing I did is fundamentally the issue. And I want to just go redo it some more and see what happens. Okay? And then when I deal with the feelings, I'll do that later and I'll come back to stage 3. And that's okay. But I think that's the process. Now, if you've gone through the change, you've taken responsibility and said, hey, there's something happening. Maybe I need to make a change outside. Maybe I don't. Then you have this possibility, I would say, of going to stage 4. And this is probably the place that we identify with purpose and purposeful living, doing the thing that I'm sort of meant to do in the way I'm meant to do it. And it's a state of being, presence, intent. There's clarity. There's a knowing. And it can be in every phase of your life. It's not necessarily I'm going to make sure all of the hungry children in the world are fed. It can be that, but it can be in every phase of your life because it is innate to who you are at that stage. You're bringing your gifts, all of them, fully into the world. You're having impact. It takes less effort. And you feel this concept, and I'm sure a lot of you have read books on these topics, this concept of flow. You know that whatever you're doing feels right. And there's a contentment in it, and a sense that you're exactly where you need to be. Now, that might sound like nirvana, this is the end game. The reality is this is not how the world works. I know that. Life is hard. It goes up, it goes down. And you can find that place, but you're probably going to be going back to the storming once in a while too and going, this doesn't feel good to me. But once you know it, I really believe It's a place you can come back to again and again and again and find more and more of your purpose there. Now, I was so amazed that I could do that. I left it in there because I thought, I can do this. This is kind of cool. There we go. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. I boiled it down to what I call 7 moments. I do have more than like 7 points in my life that felt important, but this is what I thought might bring to life the stuff I've just told you. Maybe share a little bit of how what it really means to me as a man, as a person. I want to start with the first one, which I just said is my sister. My sister Teresa was 4 months old when she died in her crib. This was about 10 months before I was born. And it's really important to me. It had a big effect on my parents, as you would expect, all the things that you would expect. It was a rare event. But it was important to me because I came into the world at a time when my mother was very, very vulnerable. And she needed me a lot. And so I was number 5 of 7 children. And it was great for me in that I got a lot of attention from my mother. I was important to her. And that was fantastic. It gave me a sense of specialness. Like there was something about me I knew was special. But it also was, I think, the primary source of my wounding, which was that responsibility that came with being special meant that I had to sacrifice certain parts of myself. In some ways, I had to kind of become her little man in a way, and that meant I had to give something up, some of my own spontaneity, some of my own life energy to serve her and to be in that place. Okay. So that was the first thing that kind of established how I was going to be in this world. Second, I call this the car. I was 3 years old when this sort of came to me. We were sitting in the parking lot of the grocery store. There were 4 of us in the car, because that's how many kids my parents had at that moment. There were more coming. My mom was in the store buying groceries, so we'd have food to eat. And I just looked around and thought, we have absolutely the crappiest car I have ever seen, just from the perspective of a 3-year-old. I mean, it didn't look like that. It didn't look good. That was the kind of car, but imagine the hubcaps gone. The paint faded extremely. The doors not working properly. You had to be like Fonzie and hit, do just the right way and figure out how to roll it up. And I thought to myself, what? I looked around, I thought, why is this? This makes no sense to me. Why? I mean, I really felt like my family was awesome. I loved my parents. I thought they were just these 2 beautiful people, and I thought we were just like super awesome. And I thought, well, is something wrong with us? Is something wrong with me? And kind of rather than going into that sort of inferiority place, which I think was created in that moment, I thought, no, that's not it. We're getting cheated. The world is cheating us in some way, and I don't like it. And I'm not going to stand for it. Somehow I'm going to fix this. I'm going to fix it for myself, and I'm going to fix it for my family. And this became, for me, kind of my jet fuel. As young and naive, and however you want to think about it, it was there. This feeling of I will not get cheated. I will get what I want. I won't lose. It was less about winning, but more about I will not lose. Moment 3 was work comes first. Work comes first. We were rabid Dallas Cowboys fans, just insane. Crying if they lost, joy if they won. So every Sunday during football season, we go to church, we come back home, had to watch the Dallas Cowboys game. Just, it was much more important than church, okay? For me, it was just true. And then I remember one Sunday, and there was more than one Sunday, but I remember one Sunday in particular when my dad said, look, all the boys, we got together and said we have to go to work. And I was probably about 12 years old. And we had a small family business. That was how we made money, and that was how put food on the table. And I calculated we had 3 hours. And I asked my dad, so are we going to be back in time for the game? And he said, I don't know. He goes, I don't know, but we got to go. So we went, and I watched the minutes ticking away. And I realized, as it went on, that we weren't going to see the game at all. We were going to miss the entire game. And I was really sad at that stage. But there was something that stuck with me. There was this sense of sacrifice, this sense that, okay, I'm doing this and it's really hard, but it's for the greater good. And those words, work comes first, really got seared into me, that there was this deeply, deeply held virtue in that concept of sacrificing to do something that seems like it's in service of the greater good. Moment 4 was, we're fast forwarding quite significantly now. It's about 4 years after I came out of college, and I was already working at Price Waterhouse at that time for 4 years. I just transferred to Houston, which was a really big office, from a small office in San Antonio, which was my hometown. And I was at a training program that summer. And I was talking to, it was being taught by a partner who said, hey, you guys aren't going to see me for a long time because I'm going to Russia. I'm starting our practice in Russia. And I was advising oil and gas companies at the time on tax issues. And so during one of the breaks, I was talking to him. His name was Byron. I said, Byron, that sounds interesting. I would be interested in doing work abroad, but I don't really want to go to Russia. I'd want to go to Germany or the UK or something a little bit calmer than that. And so that was kind of the end of that conversation. Monday rolled around. I went to work, got settled at my desk, and a secretary comes to me and says, James Crump wants to talk to you. And I was like, oh my God. He was the managing partner of the office, kind of in these big accounting firms, that's kind of godlike. And so I assumed that I was probably getting fired. And I was doing fine. I thought I was doing fine. And I couldn't imagine why I was going to have this unceremonious dismissal. So I walked to his office. I get escorted in. I sit down. He's finishing a phone call. And the office is kind of adorned with these huge bronze bucking broncs, which is like the whole corner office concept. And he finishes his call and he spins around, and it's kind of very J.R. Ewing feeling. And he's got this extremely gravelly West Texas drawl. And he looks at me and he says, hi, Mike, how you doing? And I was actually surprised he knew my name. I thought, wow, well, that's interesting. And I said, fine, how are you? And then there was this really weird, awkward silence. He was looking at me, and he kind of stared at me for it felt like 30 seconds, was probably like 5. And then he just says, so Mike, were you serious about going to Russia? And I was really taken aback, and I had all these weird thoughts racing through my head. I didn't know how to take that in, what would it mean, and then I just had an impulse. And for whatever reason, I went with it, and I said, yes, I am serious about going to Russia. And it was a big decision, and it was made like that. Why was it important for me? I mean, it's probably obvious, but it was important for a lot of reasons. It would actually pretty much mean the end of my first marriage to my high school sweetheart at that time. It would mean I'm moving 6,000 miles away from my family. It would be the place I would meet my wife. It would be the place where my children would have their earliest memories. And it would transform the way I think about the world, very fundamentally. So that was a big one for me. Why not me? I'd already been in Russia for probably close to 10 years now, and I'd made partner about 2 years earlier, which was a big deal for me. I was a partner in the U.S. firm working in Russia, And the woman that I worked for was a really powerful Russian woman who was the head of the tax practice, and I was a tax partner, and she was the head of the tax practice. And it was the week that the buildings fell in the World Trade Center buildings came down in 2001, and she announced that she was going to step down from her job because she was having some health problems. And I immediately thought, well, I don't want that job, but I'm not ready for it. And then I had this thought. These words just popped into my head. Why not me? Why not me? And it germinated for a while, and then I kind of came to this resolve that I'm going to do this. I'm absolutely going to do this. And I went in and talked to everybody that I thought I needed to talk to, and told them that I was absolutely the right person for the job, and they needed to give it to me. And I had to go head to head with a good friend of mine who was a colleague. He really wanted it, and I got it. I got it. And the reason that's important to me was because it marked kind of a transition for me from being a client service partner only to also being in the leadership of the firm. So within 2 years, I was running the Russian firm, which had about 2,000 employees at the time. And then about 2 years after that, I was elected by my partners, who were about 175 at the time, to be the senior partner for the region. And the region was called Central and Eastern Europe. It had 28 countries, about 8,000 employees, revenue of somewhere around $800 million. And yeah, that was a little scary. I was 39 years old, and I really did feel like, I had a tiger by the tail. That's something that I'd gone for something, and then I got it. And I can tell you from experience, and I don't have time for other stories, but the tiger does wake up, and a lot of stuff happens. But that was where I was. Be careful what you ask for. So this was a, I enjoyed what I did, but as things went on, I was about 6 years into the role, which I did ultimately for 8 years. And after the first 2 years, we had, how many of you remember the Great Recession? It hit emerging markets about twice as hard as anywhere else. So I had to lead brutal cost-cutting efforts for a long period of time. It meant letting people go. It meant, really, really was difficult stuff. And at the same time, trying to keep the morale up of the partners and the staff. And this required me to travel a lot. I was out and about almost every week, the better part of every week from Monday to Friday. And so that began to take its toll. I looked around. The week would start. Carolyn would be on her own for the most part. I might be traveling to Moscow or London or wherever I needed to be, and it was taking everything. Yeah, it was taking pretty much everything that I had. And the important thing, really, it sounds pretty obvious, but the impact was when I realized, and my wife Carolyn was kind of seminal in kind of bringing me around, that what was happening inside my idea of who I was fundamentally different than who was showing up on the outside. And the people that I cared most about wouldn't know that from the way that I was living at that time, from the way I spent my time. And I knew at that point that something had to change. Something fundamentally had to change. So the last moment, and I'll wrap up shortly after this, is the realization, something has to change, what do I do? In the last 2 years of this role, I decided to make a change. So I said, all right, I won't take any calls on weekends unless they're actually emergencies, and I'm going to scale back my travel, and I'm going to do some things to make sure I get to take my kids to school sometimes and pick them up sometimes, and make sure I'm at some of the events I want to be at. And then also at the end of that 2-year period, I informed the firm that I wanted a 1-year sabbatical to think about what I wanted to do next. And in the corporate world, certainly, and in the world I was in, that's really, really risky, because out of sight, out of mind. But I knew, because I lived internationally, worked internationally, that my next role would very likely be something that, again, put me on airplanes, flying to lots of different places. So I had to consider if that was something that I really wanted to do. And so at the end of that sabbatical, I resigned from PwC, from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I left the partnership. I wanted to change gears in my life. That was my decision. I'm going to reflect back just a little bit on 2 or 3 things, and I hope they're things that might also connect with you. The first one was just realizing every step I took was important. There wasn't anything that this journey was something that I had to go through, and it made a lot of sense to me. I realized that I got a lot from my parents. I got a huge amount in terms of confidence, resiliency, determination, even though I didn't have the authentic connection, that kind of deep connection of who I am with them, and I struggled to bring that out into the world. But ultimately, for me, that early wounding kind of became my gift. It really became my motivation to say, you know what, this matters deeply to me. I want to bring that kind of, I identify with this, and I want to bring this out into the world. And so at this point in my life, I know I want to work with individuals. I want to work with groups. I want to work with companies that are really passionate about thinking about how they can get more, not more productivity necessarily, but perhaps also more productivity, but care about how do we engage with people? How do we bring them, how do we help people bring their true selves, whether it's to work or whether it's home? And so that's meant a lot. That's meant a lot to me. I know for everybody in this room, you've been on your own journey. I know you've got a lot from your parents, and I really hope that in the things I've talked about, that you can find some connection to it, or that it triggers something that maybe helps you think about a next step. And with that, I'm kind of guessing I've about used my time. So I want to thank everybody for your attention and listening. That's a picture, a cheesy little picture of my family at the aquarium for Mother's Day. That's my older daughter, Victoria, my younger daughter, Abby, and Abby's sitting there, and my wife is over here too. So thank you very much. I'm certainly interested in any questions, certainly about anything I've said, or any of your own, reflections or thoughts as well. Yeah.
Tell us about your journey since you've been back, coming to Colorado, and kind of you have this big European, international, Asian experience. What now?
Well, that's a good question. Since I've been back for, I think all of us, we've been in Denver. June will be 2 years. It's surprisingly difficult to come back, and it's really been about kind of reconnecting to some extent with recognizing that I'm an American and I live here. Versus kind of a different sort of lifestyle that we've had. It's also coping with the transitions that everyone in the family has had to go through, including my children, my wife, getting a house, getting it remodeled. My God, that's been insane. It's just been insane doing that. Just that, we thought that was going to be easy, do that in 2 months and we'd be done. It's taken 2 years almost. So there are a lot of things like that were surprises. I'm really pleasantly surprised with the people that I've connected to. You're one of them. That are warm, that are open, that are interested in talking about things that I think really matter, and that are also that I think are kind of the people that open the doors for me to feel good in this world. And so now I've got the work I'm doing is I'm graduating from a program that I started 4 years ago, which is it's called somatic or body psychotherapy and transformation. So I'm graduating from that next month, and I'm working with a men's group. I've got at least one guy here from that group, and we meet every other Tuesday. I'm working with some individuals as well, and I'm starting to connect with a number of companies as well. I'm on the advisory board of one company with a couple of these guys over here, Scott and Tom. And I'm also interested in, I'm reaching out to some of the people I know in the business community, including the firm I worked with for so many years, to talk about how I can bring some of the experience, including my experience from my life in the business world and leadership in particular, to those organizations. So yeah, I'm very excited. I feel great now. I can tell you 2 years ago it was scary. I felt like I'm starting over, and I didn't feel like I should be starting over. But I love it. Yeah, Rob.
So Mike, if you have some folks who maybe realize that they're not doing what they want to do, they're traveling too much, whatever it may be, but let's say on the other hand they have an obligation to
Yeah.
How do you go about reconciling those two things? I mean, obviously you made it to a level of success that maybe you had the ability to walk away. What if someone doesn't have that ability but is kind of stuck in their own shell to some of the obligations? What are some of the things you would say to them?
You know what I would say, Ralph, is that I think that's much more the norm than perhaps the fact pattern that I went through. Because yeah, I'd been a partner with the firm for a long, long time, and that gave me certain freedoms in terms of financial freedom and stuff like that to make that choice. But I can't seem to make this work anymore. But when I talked about this kind of slightly overly complex thing, what I think happens, and it doesn't, it can happen at any point in your life, but you run into that point where I've got this feeling that something's not quite the way I want it to be, and I want to change, or I want something. My real advice to that person, or what I would ask of them is to really start to do some of that work inside. Face what that thing is, whatever that is. Maybe it connects to that sort of that wounding I talked about. Maybe it's something else. And the reality is, I think big changes, external changes like the one I made, are probably very much the exception to the rule, where that's actually the next step. I was going to move back to the US. That was our plan anyway. That was going to happen. It was just a question of whether I was going to do it with the firm or not. And so, I think for most people, I would really ask you to, figure out which way you want to go. But if you're in that place where you feel kind of the storming inside of you, is, get help, talk to people. And it's one of the things I really wanted to say here, which is that this kind of stuff, I mean, I have a little trepidation, I can tell you, about talking about this, because it's kind of like sort of this airy-fairy, purpose in life stuff, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I come from a world where results matter. You show up, you get it done. And if you didn't get it done, I don't need your excuses, okay? But what I'm telling you here from me and in my experiences, these conversations, if we're human beings and we care about what this life is all about and where we're going, they matter, and you need people around you who are willing to engage with you in these conversations, who are willing to say, okay, yeah, I get it. This is what, and I think that can give you a lot of answers to your question. And there are people who want to talk to you about it, including people like me or my wife. And this is the work that we're kind of doing now. So I saw your hand first, but I'll come to you.
What was like the first thing you did on your sabbatical? Because I imagine that was kind of a like crazy transition.
It's a really weird thing. Because the first thing that happened is it took a long time. It was at least 3 months, maybe closer to 6 months. I had an adrenaline withdrawal issue. Like anything that happened, no matter how insignificant it was, gave me a huge shot of adrenaline. And I felt this need to kind of jump on it. And it was like if Carolyn said, yesterday, you said you were going to take the kids to school, and I'd forgotten about it. I'd have this like jolt. And so kind of learning to cope with that for a little while, feeling, because I was so used to being in a place where it was situation appropriate, that it was usually not situation appropriate anymore. So it was really hard. But then I took some time. I started taking my kids to school every day, pretty much, picking them up. And that was really cool. I realized I really, really enjoyed doing that. And I got a golf instructor and took some golf lessons, and it's paid minor dividends up to this point. And I had some friends that I connected to who were curiously in a similar situation to me.
Did you journal or do anything like that during that time?
That's a great point. I was in this program which is called Core Energetics, okay, and it was a pretty intensive program. You go kind of every 2 or 3 months for about 5 days, and that became the most important part of the transformation process that I was in, because it was a time when I was with a group of people. Everything came out. You're figuratively naked, and all of the things, all of my patterns, all of the things I talked about, my achievement addiction, which was about avoiding, being a failure. All of that stuff really came out, and I had to look at it, and I had to kind of ask myself, well, is this, what are you going to do about this? How do you deal with it? And then, and also, all of my relationships, all of those things became really, really important. And so, yeah, that program was absolutely critical to me.
I was going to ask, from the time you went to sabbatical or when you decided to to where you are now, how many iterations have you had, or did you know early on what you wanted to do now? How did you arrive at that? What gives you have to do?
I had many, many iterations, from I just want to go back to work to I never want to go back to work in that same way.
I'm going through somewhat of what you're
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Welcome to it. Yeah, I went through a lot of iterations, and the thing that was out there for me was I still had a voice that was saying, this is who you are. You're this guy who went out there and you had this big job and you did this and I really identified with that. I still have dreams about that. I mean, kind of like I wake up and I'm in that world again, and that's okay. I don't hate that world, but kind of getting enough separation to say, okay, I'm a grown man now. My decisions are based on what I want to do. It's not based on what the firm is telling me, what my parents are telling me. And it's so much easier when there are external influences that kind of tell you, this is what you have to do. And so that freedom was a little alarming. And working through that, owning it, and then saying, okay, what's true for me? It was a very iterative process. Yeah.
Single book or person that influenced your thinking now the most?
I've read so many, and to be honest, I take something like from all of them. But probably okay. Yeah, the one that probably like the first one. I think my wife and I both read it because we were dealing with we were dealing with issues like our older daughter was suffering from depression, and we were concerned about whether our younger daughter was going to go down that path, and we were kind of in a breakdown phase. And I think the first book that we stumbled on, starting to look for answers, was the Eckhart Tolle book, New World, which is it's out there, it's out there a little bit, but it started the journey a little bit for us, and for me, for sure. And then I've read a lot of stuff after that.
You read The Meaning of Life by something like a middle-aged?
Oh, James Hollis. It's something about finding meaning in life in the middle of your life or something like that. He's good. He's a guy who lives in Houston. I don't know if he's alive anymore, to be honest. But look up James Hollis. You'll see a list of things. But it's not light reading, but he's good. Yeah, that was a big one for me too. Scott, thank you.
So I think you're talking to a room probably primarily 3s and 4s on your stages of growth.
Yeah.
Looking back your last 2 years, so you hit 50, you changed countries, you changed lives, you changed a very hardcore left brain, process-driven strategic lifestyle. Now you're where you are now, and we've had a lot of insightful conversations of your journey within. Is there anything you think you did wrong in that 2 years? Is there any mistakes you would have made that you would give advice to say, hey, if you're going to go on this journey, here's what watch out?
Mike, can you restate that?
Yeah, I'll restate the question. The question was kind of having made, having gone through that journey, having made some of the changes now from being kind of hard-driven, get the job done, to being in a slightly different place now. Are there any changes that I would have made as I look back? It's a really good question. The reality is I wouldn't change anything from where I am right now. But if I could go back, I would change a lot of things. If I could go back with the knowledge I have now. But I didn't have the knowledge. But if I could go back, I would realize something. And the most important thing I would realize is that I could have done all that stuff so much easier. It could have been so much easier. And I could have been better at it. And I would have loved it more. I could have, I brought my talent into the world in a significant way. But I didn't really bring my gifts. And that's to me, that's the part I'm sad when I think of that. I did a lot of good things, I can draw up the resume and it's fine. But if I went back, it would be me. I could do so many more things in a way that I would have loved my life more, to be honest. So yes. Hi. Okay.
Is that because you would have been more indecisive, or less self-doubt? Why would it have been?
It would have been easier because for me, it would have been coming from a different place. So I'll give you a simple example. I faced an issue with the Russian government at one point, and at some point it went to the highest levels, and it was scary. And no one had done this before. I certainly hadn't. How do you deal with this? And I realized at the time, I took a huge amount of that responsibility on myself. That, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to fix it. Yes, I asked people for help. I had a team around me. But the reality was, I could have engaged with other people a lot more. I could have engaged differently. I could have said, what are we going to do? How are we going to deal with this? And a lot of the stress I felt, people were willing to share it with me, but I wasn't willing to share it with them. And even afterward, I had some of my best friends and close partners say, Mike, I think you're carrying a little too much of this. And I was. They're absolutely right. And it wasn't only true in that situation. It was true in so many ways. And it goes back to that silly story, about I'm going to prove I've got this thing. I've got this. And so, okay, I can get it without doing that. I don't need that kind of, that energy to get there. I didn't need it. I thought I did, but I didn't. Does that make sense? Thanks. One more here.
So I thought you said something really eloquent. I'll try to paraphrase it, but you said, I felt at one point who I thought was the authentic me wasn't the person that seemed to be showing up. Things did something similar.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people can associate with that. Was there a triggering event or an aha moment that sort of caught you to say, I need to bring those two closer together? And what did you do about it? If you're willing to share that.
Yeah. I'll share that. Again, my wife really played a key role in kind of keeping me alive in that place, and it was opening my eyes to what we saw happening to our children. I asked permission to tell this story if it ever came up, so my daughter knows about this. But when Abby was, I think she was 8 years old, she was probably in the second or third grade, and one of the teachers had called to meet, and I didn't go to the meeting, Carolyn did. And the teacher said, something's going on with Abby. She described her as kind of a melancholy child. And I thought, like, what the hell are you talking about? My kid is awesome. She's great. It's fantastic. What are you talking about? And Carolyn really kind of grounded me and said, look, something is going on here. And we've got, we can avoid it. We can just not look at it or think about it. And that was right at that point where I was making some changes. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do something. And so that's where I made a big shift, and I started taking both of the girls to school. And Abby and I started a little routine where we would wrestle almost every night. And it's something we still do, except she's starting to beat me up a lot now. So. But what took me back was after about 3 months, the teacher spoke to Carolyn again, or maybe I was in the meeting, I don't remember for sure. But she spoke to Carolyn and said, what happened? She said, what happened with Abby? She's a different child. And it was that moment where I realized, oh my God, I thought being a father in me was about, I'm a provider, I'm a protector, I'm putting them in a nice house and all this stuff. This is what I'm doing. But they didn't care very much about that stuff. They actually wanted me to show up. And that really touched me. It gave me a completely different perspective on where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do.
Just super quick, what car did you buy when you when you finally got money?
Yeah, I did it. I did it. I've got a 535 BMW. I had to. Well, yeah. Well, I had an example I really wanted to use. I was talking about gifts, and I thought I talked about the wedding ring, and I was going to give an example of it like a gift that was inappropriate. And I thought if Raph told me, he said, "Hey, Mike, I've got a Tesla S model sitting out there for you," and I would thought, well, what was the feeling and the intent behind that? And I couldn't come up with one that made it make sense. So I had the feeling it wasn't a gift at all. So, but I would take it. I just want to put it out there. I would take it. It would make me happy if you. Never mind.
Maybe one or two more questions and we'll wrap up.
Hi, Nick.
Hey.
So my question is on the time before the sabbatical, when you finally realized you had a problem at home and with yourself. What were the markers before that? Because I think, speaking as a married man with a family, my biggest fear is getting too focused on work and losing sight of the bigger picture. So looking back, and how do you make sure that you don't fall into that again? I know you're working with Carolyn now, so you're kind of on the same team, but it's still easy just to plow right into work and forget about all these other things happening.
Yeah, the markers come in the people who are around you, the people who help ground you sometimes, because you will not necessarily see it.
Right.
You're in the vortex, and when I think back to that time, it was looking at it was my wife, it was looking at the way my children looked at me, which was weird to me because I thought I'm a pretty awesome dad. I really felt that way, but I thought they're not looking at me like that. Like they're looking at me like, oh, you're home. And Saturday, I'm half drunk with exhaustion, and then on the phone for a couple of hours. And in retrospect, when I look back, yeah, those are all markers, But it was really the people who were closest to me that had the courage to kind of bring it to me, really bring it to me. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
very
everybody.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all again. I'll just take a quick couple minutes. Thank you very much, Mike, for being open, willing, our first guinea pig, and also just for being open with your story is fantastic. So thanks very much. I always forget to do this, so thank you, Amanda, wherever you are. Where are you? Thank you. Amanda got everything organized, set up, and we were running around trying to figure out how to turn off this darn music at some point midway through, but we got it done, and pretty much everything was flawless, so thank you very much. If we can all just give her a hand, that would be great. 3 messages for me that I'd like to just leave you guys with. First, what we'd like to be having coming out of some of these conversations is just a little jolt, like a little spark of, was there something new that you may have heard? And for me, it's, you think that you're aware of who you are, but there's a lot of things that help mold you and get you there, and there are a lot of different paths that you can take, and sometimes we just fall into the ones that we fall into, and perhaps we could just think for a second, or maybe ask someone who's close to us, who knows us best, what they think of us. So if we have one thing to leave with tonight, the first thing is, I'd challenge you guys to go ask a few people who are close to you that love you and ask them how they think your path is going, and just to see how that goes. So that's sort of the first thing. The second thing is, and this happens a lot in our industry, is that people do things in series. They say, when I get to this point, then I'm going to do this other thing. When I hit this success, then I'll be able to spend more time at home, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to leave you with the thought of, you can do things in parallel, right? This doesn't mean just stop everything and go do something else, but once you find out something new, go ahead and try to start doing something little in parallel, right? Just go out and try that. And then the third thing is, in this case, you've got a wonderful relationship with Carolyn, but you can't always talk to your spouse about things. If you can, it's great if you have that relationship. If you don't, or if it's a topic that doesn't work, you have all these folks that are in this room that care deeply about these things. You've got us. Just reach out to a community and talk to someone. You're not alone in trying to figure these things out. So those would be sort of the 3 messages that I would say as you go. Have a jolt in your life. Let it think about it. Try it in parallel, and there's other people here that can help you. Last final things, we've got a couple swag items on the way out if you want to pick it up, a couple notebooks that say make life count on them. They're obviously our slogan. They're blank and empty. You can use them for whatever you want. You can jot down notes, but they're yours for the taking. Amanda sent a survey out to anyone who has a ticket with an email. It's 7 questions, should literally take 2 minutes. If you can get at it this evening or tomorrow, that would be great. And then finally, we're going to send out an email with the date of the next one, which will be in the fall. And we actually have our next speaker here tonight, who's Tom Croak, if you could just raise your hand over there. Not to give away Tom's speech, but the topic that I'd like to, not to put words into your mouth, you can go in whatever direction you want with it, but it would be really nice. Tom spent a good time with law and corporate law, and basically was a stable human being that provided for his family, right? But he is someone who left, and you've got these pop sockets. Anyone know what, these little guys on the back of phones that you never really thought you needed until you had them, and now you're like, these things are amazing. Tom left corporate law and has had a journey and got into the pop sockets and really helped them blow up very big. The point is not about that. I mean, that's the story. But the point is there's so many of us that are out there that are in a job having to provide for a family and maybe don't love exactly what that job is. And yet you can't just drop it because you've got accountability, right? You have family, you've got responsibilities and things of that nature. So really the conversation would be around, how did that happen? What could you do? How do you make that possible for yourself? And make those moves. So I'm really excited for that conversation. It could be something different. If it's completely different, that's fine too. But we're excited to have that next one. So just look out in your email for that. And other than that, if you enjoyed it, just spread the word. We'd like to continue to have these meaningful conversations with folks. But thank you again for tonight, and we'll be around for a little while longer.